All right, we are back from our break to the next keynote speech, which is by Angela Nakafeero, who serves as the Commissioner Gender and Women Affairs, Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development in the Government of Uganda. If you have any questions for Angela, please put them in the chat and we'll take them at the end.
Thank you very much, the entire group of Ni3, especially the global team as well as the Uganda team. My name is Angela Nakafeero. I'm serving as the Commissioner, Gender and Women Affairs, Ministry of Gender, Labour, Social Development, Uganda. I'm also a member of Ni3 AIG. I'm going to talk about child marriage and teenage pregnancy in Uganda. As part of my introduction, ladies and gentlemen, gender-based violence is one of the underlying causes of inequality and poverty in Uganda, as reflected in our Uganda Demographic Health Survey 2011, 2016, as well as our third National Development Plan. In Uganda, GBV is well widespread and affects all persons, irrespective of who we are, social, economic empowerment, and political status. We are all affected. You also find that gender-based violence is deeply rooted in our social and cultural norms for all cultural groups in Uganda. Good enough, we have an enabling policy and legal environment against gender-based violence. Our Constitution of 1995 is very clear, and of course, in terms of banning violence against women and girls, we equally have several laws and policies in place, specifically the Domestic Violence Act of 2010, Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act of 2010, Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act 29, and of course, in 2016, we also amended the National Children Act and integrated issues against violence against children. Uganda has also adopted almost all international and regional commitments on gender equality and women's empowerment. According to our gender-based violence policy of 2016 and action plan on elimination of violence in Uganda, which provides an overall policy framework to prevent and respond to gender-based violence, including child marriage and teenage pregnancy, female genital mutilation, elimination of impunity, and fostering zero tolerance to gender-based violence. Let me go on specific to child marriage and associated practice. Child marriages in Uganda are very common, and these are associated with all forms of gender-based violence. You'll find that sexual violence is part of this, and of course, when girls enter into that relationship when they're still young, the cases of defilement, there are also cases of rape. There are cases of child labor because when girls are married, they're supposed to take on all the roles and responsibility of a married person, and that has come with serious consequences emerging of child labor. Child neglect, physical and emotional violence, as well as economic exploitation. Ladies and gentlemen, child marriage is also associated with other negative cultural practices like bride price and female genital mutilation. You'll see in the pictures, we all celebrate marriage. And of course, if you're going to get married, then the family of the person who is marrying the girl takes lots of gifts. For instance, in the central, as the first picture shows, the family of the man or boy marrying comes with so many gifts in form of bride price. You'll also find that in certain parts of Uganda, like Western region and part of Karamoja, you have to bring so many heads of cattle, from 10 and above, depending on the region you're coming from. So bride price in our case is widely practiced and celebrated by all communities. And of course, child and forced marriages are common in search for wealth, dowry, and bride price. And of course, in our case, 1 in 2 women was married before turning 18 years. So you really see that 50% of women find themselves victims and survivors of child marriage. Child marriage is also associated with female genital mutilation, especially amongst the Sabines in the districts of Kapchora, Kwen, and Buko, where 50% of women and girls undergo female genital mutilation, and among the Pokots in Amdat, Nakapilipilita, and Moroto districts, where almost 95% of women and girls have undergone female genital mutilation. I apologize for those, but the picture you see there is a picture where female genital mutilation is being conducted against the girl who is lying down. So it's a very horrible experience and has some serious consequences, especially where girls are cut, because at times the reproductive system is affected. And in the communities that are practicing female genital mutilation, cutting the private parts marks the climax of an annual process of initiation into womanhood. There's the aspect of evoking the spirits. There are special celebrations. There are special names given to girls that are mutilated. They're given special titles. They dress differently. If you came to Uganda and went to Karamoja, you will really see beading is almost what a woman would want. But those beads, the way they are dressed, indicate whether a girl has been mutilated, whether she's ready, whether she has been booked for marriage. So it carries a lot of meaning to the Karamojong in Uganda. Women and girls that are female are mutilated are given privileges. And of course, in the context of the Karamojong and the Sabines, is part of the cultural identity. So the possibility of a girl surviving female genital mutilation is really very, very minimal. We also note that when the prohibition of female genital mutilation law was enacted in Uganda, and because people strongly identify with female genital mutilation, there's a backlash between the female genital mutilation law in place and the actual practice. We've got cases of people that are crossing from Uganda to Kenya to undertake female genital mutilation. We are also seeing, previously we used to have traditional surgeons performing the act, but these days we see peers amongst girls cutting their fellow girls. There's also the aspect of medicalization, and of course, there's also the aspect of dictating women's participation in cultural celebrations if in any case the woman of the girl is not cut. Child marriage is also associated with abductions, where teenage girls are abducted by male adolescents and kept in isolation. You can see a picture of a young girl who is having a child. Some of these are cases of girls that are abducted. And of course, the abduction itself marks the beginning of the negotiation between the two families, where families negotiate the amount of bride price that has to be paid. It also marks the beginning of all forms of discrimination and all forms of violence. Child labor sets in, defilement sets in, physical violence sets in, and of course, emotional violence is also a very big component that comes in with child marriage. We also note that child marriage marks the end of enjoyment of multiple rights of a woman or girl. Esther has been very key and emphasized this component that in most cases when girls are married young, they miss out on the right to education, they miss out on the right to be protected, they miss out on the right to access sexual reproductive health, and of course the right to participate and live in the life of dignity. Emerging evidence shows that 49% of women between 20 to 49 years were married by the age of 18. In our case, the age of consent for marriage and sex is 18 years. 15% are married by the age of 15 years. So that alone is in contradiction with the existing laws. We also know that 66% of all new forms of infections, HIV infections, are contracted by adolescent girls. So their lives are put into very challenging circumstances when they're subjected to sexual violence. 25% of teenage girls are pregnant, and of course, some of them already have a child. When it comes to access to education, in primary, 78%, and then 82% of girls are out of the education system, especially in northern Uganda. And only 22% of adolescent girls are enrolled in secondary education. So you can see that we are missing quite a lot in terms of girls accessing education as one of their fundamental rights. And one of the key factors is to do with teenage pregnancy, is to do with child marriage. Within the COVID context, ladies and gentlemen, there was a 19% increase in teenage pregnancies during the month of June in 2020 that was observed compared to the same month in 2019. You can see the graph whereby the line in red indicates teenage pregnancy during 2020, and there was an increase in the levels of teenage pregnancy, mainly due to the lockdown where girls were not in schools, where girls were in the communities and within their families and homes. Reflecting on the health management system, we also see an increase of 22.5% of teenage pregnancy amongst girls of 10 to 24 years between March. That's when government announced the lockdown. There are also variations noted across the districts. Kampala, the cases are high. Wakiso, this is in the central region. We have similar circumstances in other districts, but overall, we note an increase in the numbers of teenage pregnancy. The variations in this respect really reflect the differences between access to services and awareness of the existence of the importance of antenatal services as a result of which teenage pregnant girls are captured in the health management information system. We also note cases of pregnant girls that don't go for antenatal. This shows the rate at which girls between 16 to 24 years old were able to attend antenatal services. So what are some of the drivers of schoolgirls engaging in sex? Because they either find themselves pregnant, mainly because they engage in sex. Most of these cases are really to access material needs. There's quite a lot in terms of peer pressure, which accounts to 22.4%. Some of them are outward venture and explorer. Of course, the pressure with their peers. There's also the component of sexual coercion, low esteem, which account to 6.5%. We have a challenge of family breakdown, and also the lack of exposure to sexuality education. And some of them, because of the socialization, feel that they would want to start a family. These are some of the factors that Esther already emphasizes in their trial for psychosocial gaming and the experience we've gone through. So many factors do account for why girls are engaging into early sex. This reflects the rate of percentage of school dropout due to teenage pregnancy, and this was a study that was done by FAWEU, Forum for African Women Educationalists of Uganda, in 2017. And of course, Eastern Uganda was leading. And this is why you see cases of female genital mutilation as one of the key practices that is going on. West Nile, this is where we have abductions of young girls and of course forcing them into marriage. And then other parts is basically due to the drive around bride price. Adolescents are also pressured into marriage, according to the recent study that was done this year by FAWEU Uganda again. In most cases, families believe that the girls are safer when they are married. This accounts to 15.2%. And of course, when young boys make girls pregnant, they are forced to marry them off. So 4.4% of young male adolescents are forced to enter into marriage because they've made the girls pregnant. Some also think that they are mature enough to marry, and of course that indicates limited understanding of the age of consent. Some families think that when they receive money or other goods from a spouse, then they are free to go into a marriage. You also would find that because of the socialization, adolescents feel that it's normal for them to get married because they're encouraged by their parents. They are also encouraged by the communities. In the lockdown, we had serious issues. Of course, when schools closed, then families thought that they should send their girls into early marriages. So there are so many factors that push these young girls into marriage. And of course, also they find themselves pregnant at a tender age. I also want to talk about where are we coming from, because for instance, in violence against children in schools, by the time we started this kind of work in 2012, the cases of violence in schools were really exceptionally high. Corporal punishment by then was 82%. Sexual violence was at 77% in primary and then 80% in secondary. And of course, 5.9 girls by then were subjected to defilement. The perpetrators were mainly male teachers, 67%, peers, 22%, but also female teachers at 5% and non-teaching staff at 6%. The higher levels of sexual violence we discovered by then higher levels of sexual violence in private schools compared to government schools. But what was really very disheartening was the fact that the level of reporting was only at 39.8%. So with additional interventions, that picture is changing, ladies and gentlemen, because according to the study that was conducted in 2017, we noted a reduction in emotional abuse for up to the level of 35 for girls and then 17 for boys. Sexual violence also reduced, currently at 35% for girls and 17 for boys. The perpetrators are also changing. There's a reduction of the perpetrators within a school setting, and we are seeing more perpetrators within our families and communities. Reporting of cases of violence has also improved from the 39.7% to the current level of 53% for boys and for girls, and then 57% for boys. We are seeing more young people disclosing cases of sexual violence, and of course that makes it easier for the young people to access support services. Our biggest challenge for the time being is in terms of effective case management. But we celebrate the changes, the positive changes in reporting, and of course challenging the government institutions to scale up in effective case management. I also need to note that child marriage, as Esther has also highlighted, is a cost to national development. The World Bank conducted a study in 2017 which indicated that if we reduced teenage pregnancy, we would be able to reduce fertility rate by 10%, by 10 to 19%. The study also indicated that being born to a mother younger than 18 years increases the risk of infant mortality by 4.7%. And of course, we are challenging ourselves that we need to end teenage pregnancy and child marriage if we are going to reduce infant mortality from by 6.5% to 6.3%. Ending child marriage today could also generate a total of $3 billion per year by Uganda, for Uganda by 2030. So the cost of teenage pregnancy and child marriage is really huge to our national development. And of course, the cost of all forms of violence is also high to the national development. This time around, we are prioritizing ending female genital mutilation in our third national development plan, but also supported by the Public Finance and Management Act that demands that all sectors allocate resources towards the elimination of gender-based violence in Uganda. We've also had a number of efforts by government of Uganda, and this is where my role as a commissioner comes in, to reduce child marriage, but also ending teenage pregnancy. We are enhancing the legislative and policy framework for prevention and response of gender-based violence at the national and district level. The Child Amendment Act of 2016 is very clear in this regard, as well as the National Policy of 2020, which prohibits child marriage and teenage pregnancy. Recently, especially learning from the COVID lockdown, the Ministry of Education and Sports has also adopted the national guidelines on prevention of teenage pregnancy and providing for re-entry of child mothers into school setting under the Second Chance Education Program. We welcome this development because it will give an opportunity for child mothers to go back to school. Parliament has also adopted the Sexual Offences Bill at the beginning of this year, and of course that provides another strong ground for us to embark on ending child marriage and teenage pregnancy. We are strengthening government institutions for violence prevention, and we are witnessing an increased integration of GBV response in government programs and program implementation action plan. This will help us to scale up budgeting and scale up implementation of the existing programs. We are tackling the prevention of GBV through social norm change, which is reflected through strengthened collaboration and coordination with religious and traditional culture institutions. In most cases, as I've elaborated on the previous slides, you find that child marriage is deeply rooted in our social norms. So by strengthening collaboration with the culture institutions and religious institutions, we'll be able to check on the negative social norms that perpetuate child marriage and teenage pregnancy. We are also working on improving the quality of services for the survivors. Quite a lot is happening in terms of strengthening the justice sector to be able to deal with cases that are reported, psychosocial support, but also providing for effective investigation and generation of evidence to support the court processes. Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development is equally working closely with data generation and packaging institutions, in this case the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, to ensure that we are able to improve the data quality, availability and capacities, and packaging as well as dissemination. We are strengthening the women's movement and engagement of civil society organizations. In Uganda, women's organizations are really complementing the work of government in terms of reducing child marriage and teenage pregnancy, and we like to acknowledge this close partnership. What do we see as the importance of the prosocial games, and of course bearing in mind the lessons from Ni3 Uganda experiences? Already with the COVID context, we are witnessing increasing digitalization, where the web is the main source of information, support services, and of course taking into account the COVID context, we are having more young people going through a participatory process where, depending on the content of the game, the games remodel the behavior and interest and ignite action among young people. Through these games, children are able to access information on a wider scope of issues. They're challenged to take action for themselves, but also for others. And this is helping young people to become positive bystanders by taking action and ensuring that their colleagues are protected. Prosocial games have also increased helpful and decreased artful behavior, where we are seeing new skills and knowledge acquired, and they're able to apply this kind of knowledge and skills in their real life situations. The aspect of agency is coming up when young people are taking action in terms of reporting. Reporting has improved, and we are also seeing positive change in terms of the actions that are being taken by the service providers. Thirdly, the Ni3 efforts in Uganda have also been an eye-opener for other sectors in Uganda. We are seeing other sectors like health has started to develop prosocial games on other issues that of concern. So we would like to celebrate the Ugandan experience as opening up the space, opening up our minds to think how we can utilize prosocial games in terms of pushing for positive change and challenging the negative social norms and practices. As a way forward, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is very, very important that we have our prosocial games modeled according to existing models in place. For instance, there's the Inspire, where we are talking about implementation and enforcement of laws, norms and values, having safe environment, having parents and caregivers supporting, having issues around economic income and economic strengthening, response and support, and of course, education and skills really coming out clearly. We are currently implementing the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative, and of course, these kind of models offer great insight into GBV prevention and response, and in future development of pro-social games, it's important that they're informed by existing models and programs on elimination and prevention, elimination and response to gender-based violence. The development and implementation of more programs and supporting survivors and victims of child marriages and teenage pregnancy is very, very important. The re-entry into school settings, for instance, in Uganda, is going to provide an opportunity for young girls to take positive action in terms of going back to school. And these are the messages that are coming out clearly within the game that the Ugandan team has developed. Access to sexual reproductive health is critical. Economic empowerment is critical. And of course, skilling will also be very, very critical. So as we do our games, we also need to anchor and strengthen the delivery of the games, information and knowledge with other ongoing programs and processes. Long-term funding protection of children from all forms of violence is very, very critical. I know, of course, we've already been informed that the funding is not likely to continue, but we are challenged that we come up with long-term funding that can build on the gains that we've got from the experiences of using prosocial games. So ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you listening to me, and I'm glad that in our case, this change whereby, as reflected in the photo, whereby parents are coming in to protect the girls against child marriage and teenage pregnancy. And of course, also services being scaled up to ensure that our young girls are protected against child marriage and teenage pregnancy. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and great appreciation to the Global Ni3 initiative towards ending violence against women and girls. Thank you very much. We welcome your insights and questions to the Ugandan Ni3 experiences. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, Angela, firstly, I must really acknowledge you for sketching out the sad reality of female genital mutilation, child sexual abuse, and child marriage in early pregnancy, which is happening in Uganda. But again, sadly, we're seeing this happen in so many communities across the globe. So, thank you so much for laying it out like this for us. We're seeing a very active YouTube chat where people are asking questions, and we have Esther, who is Ni3 Uganda's research fellow, who is engaging with some of the questions. But specifically for you, Angela, Adele asks, clearly, Uganda has extensive laws in place, but are penalties for breaching the law, for example, as in the case of FGM, implemented?
Well, as you've noted in my presentation, we find that because of the deeply enrooted negative social norms, female genital mutilation being one of them, and the law very strong, there's a lot of backlash. And because of that, the communities that are practicing female genital mutilation still want to hold on to female genital mutilation. So as a government, we are trying to readjust in our approaches. We are engaging the elders in these communities so that together we come up with an alternative rite of passage. Otherwise, if you look at the statistics where 95% of the girls and women are mutilated, of course, we'll have all the prisons full of people that are mutilating. So we are adjusting. We want to come up collectively with our cultural institutions an alternative rite of passage as we push for the enforcement of the law.
Got that. Thank you for answering that. Another question we have is, what has the government done to protect girls from child marriage and teenage pregnancy during this COVID period?
I missed part of your question.
Yeah, I'll repeat that for you. What
Yes,
has
please.
the government of Uganda done to protect girls from child marriage and from teenage pregnancy during this COVID period?
Thank you very much. In terms of the COVID context, especially where we experienced a lockdown, we are now going through the second lockdown. It was very, very challenging because most of the services were really closed. The best option that we had during that time in the context of the COVID lockdown was to scale up our interventions online. We encouraged online reporting of cases, potential cases of child marriage. But of course, that did not stop the sexual abuse that was happening within the homes and the communities. That's why you're seeing the statistics on teenage pregnancy really escalating. This time around, we've learned we want to deploy community-based village health teams to be able to watch what's happening in the communities. I know it's a little bit difficult when it comes to monitoring the home setting. And that is where we have the biggest challenge, where sexual abuse of our children is going on.
All right. Thank you for answering that again, Angela. We have a comment for you from one of our viewers. They say that you have given a very informative presentation and thank you for that. It feels that there is a way to go. But do you think we can be optimistic that things are moving in the right direction?
For personally, reflecting on the Ugandan experience, especially in 2016, GBV generally was 56%. Today, it's at 51%. Yes, GBV across board is still high, but of course, it's an indication that there's a reduction. I'm optimistic that with the new programming that we've adopted as government, working closely with civil society organization, working closely with the private sector and development partners, as well as challenging the negative social norms, will in future likely to really break through in terms of reducing violence. And of course, I'm also aware that it calls for a lot of resources. It calls a lot of efforts in terms of shifting the norms. We are trying our level best, and of course, the support of other development partners. Experiences of Ni3 that can be scaled up are very critical in this particular challenge.
Very well noted. You've actually brought out the point of collaboration here. In fact, None in 3 Uganda's game is the first to be trialed from the 4 games that are being developed. Do you think, what is your opinion on the importance of collaboration between game developers, between civil society organizations, between the government and the other stakeholders to actually make a real difference?
There's quite a lot of work that we can do collectively. Of course, in terms of the models that I talked about, we need to anchor our games on the ongoing models that have informed our programming, models that are informed by the policies and laws, and of course, models that are resourced. And this is where we feel that collaboration is critical. We can have the game developers reflecting on the realities on the ground, reflecting on what we have in our laws and policies, but also building on and consolidating on the programs that we are undertaking. So the way forward, ladies and gentlemen, is more in terms of collaboration and consolidating the gain from the games, but also the gains from other programs that we're implementing as a country.
Very well put. In fact, at the end of today, our last session is a panel discussion between game designers, game developers, and civil society organization members from Uganda to discuss how this collaboration can actually bring forth sustained change, like you spoke about, continued change. On that note, Angela, yes,
Okay.
please go ahead.
The games are providing an additional tool that we can utilize. We've been focusing more on using music, dance, and drama, using physical meetings, working online by using digital services. So where you have the games that are coming in, and of course, this is a very important opportunity for young people. They really enjoy the games. It will help us in terms of shifting norms and attitudes, but also encouraging and challenging all of us to take action. Thank you very much.